Here's something I want you to think about. When was the last time you sat down to do something that really mattered to you? Maybe it was a project, have a conversation, a moment of quiet. How long did it actually take before something pulled you away? A notification, a thought, the urge to check something. If your answer is almost immediately, that's not a you problem. And it's also not a discipline problem. It's a design problem. And today, we're going to talk about what is actually going on and what you can do about it. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. So first, let me start by sharing my own rumbles in this arena. I wrote an article on Substack last week called "Your Nervous System is Being Exploited." And in the opening of that article, I talked about how I had blocked time to sit down and write on a Friday afternoon. Problem one was that it was Friday afternoon, and I'm usually really low on resources and exhausted by Friday afternoon. And I didn't really pad my environment. I wasn't very focused. My office was a mess. I kind of went into it with an overwhelmed brain. And wouldn't you know it, literally like 5 minutes into the time that I was supposed to be writing, I checked my email. I responded to a text. I scrolled randomly through an app notification that I didn't even remember putting on my phone. And then, of course, I ended up on Instagram, scrolling through a high school friend's post about her sourdough starter. And what I want you to take away from the story is that if someone who just spent weeks building a masterclass on reclaiming focus, which is exactly what I was writing about that afternoon, by the way, was this whole class on reclaiming focus in a world designed to pull it away from you. If I couldn't do it, right? It's not really about knowing better. It's about something deeper, something older, something that lives in the body, not the mind. So what most of us are calling a focus problem is actually often a nervous system regulation problem in disguise. And here's what I mean by that. When your nervous system is overwhelmed, depleted, scattered, chronically stressed, it becomes restless, hungry for relief. Not a solution, just relief. Something to take the edge off, even just momentarily. And of course, we live in a world that's become extraordinarily skilled at selling us that relief cheaply and endlessly, without ever addressing the actual hunger underneath. So a calm, well-resourced nervous system can tolerate stillness. It can sit with an uncomfortable feeling long enough to ask what it actually needs. But a dysregulated one reaches for the phone, for the scroll, for the snack, for the next thing and the next. Because reaching feels like relief, even when, of course, we know it isn't. There's a whole distraction economy that isn't just competing for your attention. It is literally counting on your dysregulation to keep you coming back again and again and again. Your attention is the most valuable commodity on earth. And a $1 trillion industry landscape has been built around harvesting it, right? You know this on some level to be true. Every app, every platform, every notification has been engineered by behavioral scientists, not to serve you, but to keep you reaching. And there's a piece to this that I think is especially relevant to midlife. If you are in perimenopause or menopause, your nervous system, your brain, which your brain, of course, is a very important part of your nervous system, is going through one of the most significant neurological shifts in your adult life. Estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone. It's a brain hormone, one that plays a direct role in focus, attention, memory, and even emotional regulation. So, of course, as estrogen fluctuates as we travel through midlife, so does its influence on those systems. And nothing is broken, right? I know it's really easy to kind of interpret our brains as being broken at midlife, but they're not. They're just changing, they're shifting, they're recalibrating. The practical reality is that midlife women are working with a nervous system that is more reactive, more easily overwhelmed, and less able to regulate than it was a decade ago. Layered on top of that is the emotional weight of this stage of life, which we've talked about so many times on the show, the sleep dysregulation that comes with hormonal shifts, the relentless pace of modern life. And what you have is a nervous system that's chronically depleted. And a depleted nervous system is the distraction economy's perfect customer. So what I find really fascinating about all of this and what I taught in the masterclass that I just recently taught about focus, reclaiming your focus, is that distraction is not random, right? So I want you to start paying really close attention to when the urge to reach for distraction hits hardest. It tends to happen at very specific and even predictable moments. When you sit down to do something that feels uncomfortably important, like me on that Friday afternoon writing my outline for my masterclass. Maybe it's when a feeling starts to surface that you just don't want to sit with. Or when the truth of something in your life starts getting really hard to avoid. There's interesting research that was published in Frontiers in Psychology that found that people tend to choose distraction over other coping strategies most often when emotional intensity is high. So the more uncomfortable something feels, the harder and faster we reach for an exit. We call that a focus problem, right? But underneath, it's really an avoidance strategy. The nervous system encounters something that feels a little bit threatening, a hard creative risk, a conversation that you need to have, a life that isn't quite matching up with what we imagined. And it does what depleted nervous systems do. It reaches for relief. It reaches for the nearest exit. So the question, I don't think, is really, why can't I focus? Although I'm not going to disregard that, of course, if you aren't taking care of your basic biology needs, you aren't going to be able to focus, right? If I'm super hungry, if I haven't slept in 2 days, if I haven't moved my body in a while, I'm way more agitated and distracted than if those things were tended to. The better question is, what am I avoiding? That's not judgment, right? It's the most important question you can ask, because the answer is almost always where the real work lives. So as we close this out, just hear this. Reclaiming your focus is not primarily about putting your phone in another room. It's not about a better morning routine or a stricter schedule. Those things can help, but they're really downstream solutions to an upstream problem. The real work is about building a nervous system that is resourced enough to tolerate stillness, to tolerate uncomfortable emotions, present enough to choose what actually matters, regulated enough to stay in the room when things get uncomfortable instead of reaching for that closest exit. So again, that means tending to the things that regulate your nervous system in the first place: sleep, movement, nourishment, connectedness, stillness. It means getting honest about what you're avoiding and why. Why do you have the hiding habits that you do? I talk a lot about hiding habits in my book. If what I shared with you today resonates, if some part of you recognized yourself in any of it, just ask yourself this question before moving on with your day-to-day. Where in my life is distraction serving as an escape hatch? How is it allowing me to hide from bigger work? What am I actually trying to avoid? You may not have the answer right away, and that's okay. Just let it be there. Let the question be there. Because awareness, of course, is always the way out. And your attention, your actual full present attention, is truly one of the most powerful resources you have. You deserve to reclaim it. It belongs to you. Stop giving it away so easily. And if you want to check out the masterclass that I just taught, you can go to my website, graceandgrit.com, and where it says programs, there's a drop-down menu, and you can see there's a whole section for masterclasses because I have a ton of masterclasses that you can purchase a la carte. You can just buy them as single masterclasses. And the Reclaim Your Focus masterclass is the one that I most recently taught. So you can check that out. I want to say it's $29. All right, my friends, go out and have an amazing day. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.